apartment. Anyone who is prepared to give away all their worldly possessions can join Kommune 1. But until now, the circle of candidates has been restricted.
Anyone who doesn't know this will either grasp it, absorb it, or betray us.
Yes, hello. It's Jason Louv. Welcome back to the Ultra Culture Podcast, and welcome to 2021. You made it. You're alive. You actually made it through 2020. Of course, there's no guarantee 2021 is going to be any better. It's certainly going to be weird. It's certainly going to be complicated. It's going to be full of all kinds of challenges that we can't even foresee yet. But hey, at least you made it through 2020, the year from hell. And hopefully we will reascend to at least a purgatory realm, if not paradise. But hopefully we will not descend simply to just another circle of hell. You know what the secret of hell is, by the way? Why don't I just... Shit, I was going to say something else, but you know what? You know what the secret of hell is? The secret of hell is not trying to save other people. Sounds largely counterintuitive, but hear me out. Imagine a giant boiling cauldron, as if in an Eastern religious tapestry or wall painting, like from a Buddhist monastery or something like that. Imagine a giant boiling cauldron where demons stir people in molten metal or lava or just water or spaghetti sauce, and everyone's having a real bad time. Well, if you look closely, you might see that everyone is clinging on to everyone else very, very tightly, probably because they're trying to drag that person out of hell too, or they're just so attached to that person that they just can't bear to let them go. This is how hell works in the real world too. Imagine something more visceral, something more literal. Imagine, like, for instance, a meth house. Some of you probably don't have to imagine that. If you don't know what that's like, watch the movie Spun. Excellent movie from about 10 years ago. Meth house. So house where a bunch of people are doing meth or heroin or whatever it is they happen to be doing. And everyone's kind of built their weird, messed up hell realm family in that house. And yeah, it's terrible. And yeah, people are dying. They might be committing crimes. They might be attacking each other. They might be doing all kinds of god-awful things. But at least they have this weird sense of camaraderie and solidarity. And if anyone ever tries to leave to, get their life together, those people are going to start screeching at that person and dragging them right back in, pulling every guilt trip in the book. How dare you? How dare you leave us? What, you think you're better than us? You think you're above this? Or when they really lay it on, they'll do something like, no, you need to stay here to save me. You need to get me out of this. But of course they don't really want to leave, because if they wanted to leave, they would have left that drug house. They just want company. And that's how hell works. It works like that in a dysfunctional family. It works like that in a drug house, and it works like that as we're seeing on a planetary level. So if I was to give you one bit of advice, or actually it's not even advice, if I was just to spew some phrase into the universe, it's that if you want to leave a situation, just leave. Don't bother trying to take anybody with you that doesn't want to go. If they want to go, fine. But don't do any of this no one left behind type thing, because then you're just going to get stuck. Okay, so that's just a bit of word to the wise. Sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes the best way that you can be a role model to other people is simply to leave a bad, abusive, or destructive situation, and therefore to prove that it can be done. If you stick around to drag everyone else out with you, well, you're probably not going to get out. But if you leave, then it proves it can be done, and those who are inspired by it will do that. Obviously, this is a metaphor. You can apply it to all kinds of things in life. But I'm also speaking from my own life, as I have finally escaped Los Angeles. Yes, I too am one of the great migration, one of the people who have joined the great migration out of Los Angeles, out of California. I don't know if I will ever go back to California. Maybe if things go back to some semblance of normality. But honestly, between the total shutdown of the state, the rampant, unbelievably bad collapse of the economy, the rampant, frightening and untreated substance abuse on the street, the great masses of people who are homeless and mentally ill and are not receiving treatment or housing or any type of compassion. Between that and the hellacious governor and mayor and all of this, and the massive cost of living, the inability to even rent, let alone buy property, I've decided to say enough, and vote with my feet. So I've left. And I feel good about it. I feel really good about it. I'll talk about it more on Duncan Trussell's newest podcast, where I am a guest. So check that out for more on that. I won't go too much into soliloquy on that. Anyways, got a great podcast ahead for you. This is actually another one from Office Hours, but this is a conversation between me and Chet Zar, very famous artist. You may know him from his work with the band Tool, and he also has done a ton of work in Hollywood. He did a bunch of the designs for the movie Darkman, which I was obsessed with as a kid, which is really hilarious that we are now friends. Also, he did a bunch of work on the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes and a bunch of other ones that you can find more out about by Googling him, Chet Zar, Z-A-R. Great guy, really nice dude, great artist. And I am happy to say he's been a really dedicated student, and this conversation is actually about money magic and manifesting wealth using money, which has been an ongoing theme on the podcast because it's topical. In Chet's case, actually, after this podcast, he was very successful in doing a ton of financial workings that really, really put him forward, and I'm really happy about that. But this was his initial question where we started to talk about it. I do mention in this podcast an upcoming wealth course. That's actually Adept Initiative and Fortuna Working, which is already out. It's on the site. But this was recorded last year, 2019. It's not 2020 anymore. So this was recorded back in 2019. It's a great podcast. Hopefully there's a lot of useful info in it, and you'll really like it. All right, hang in there, everyone. I know it's rough. It might continue to be rough, but do what you can to stay free, to stay happy, to stay healthy. Look after the people around you as best you can, but always remember at the end of the day, your health and happiness are your responsibility alone, and you can choose to be a role model for other people by prioritizing yourself, right? So prioritize your own health and happiness. Don't drown with other people. Become a role model of somebody who figured things out, whatever that means for you right now, in this moment, in this year, 2021. And here's to a great new year with high hopes and prayers for everyone. We'll get through it. All right, lots of love. Talk to you soon.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
Pretty good.
I want to ask you about money magic.
Okay.
I don't know how to approach it. It seems like I've done it before for specific amounts of money that I needed for bills or whatever. It always works, but I'm trying to get out of this crazy loop of, boom or bust as an artist.
I thought you said boomer bust for a second, like baby boomer. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think I'm Gem.
I've been looking at too many memes. Okay. Yeah, me too. So.
I'm just not sure how to approach it because, living as an artist, an independent artist, is insane.
Yep.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yep.
It's like the other day I had, $100 to my name. That's it. And it's like, oh shit, I've got to come up with thousands of dollars really fast because my property tax and I own a house. And so it's like I bust my ass and from just a regular business standpoint, I know how to make money. I actually make, for an independent artist, I make pretty good money actually.
Great. It's just not consistent because
it's exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, is this one of these things that, it's cool to just kind of do large chunks, a little extra boost through Magick when you need it? Or, I'd really like for money to not be an issue at all. So I could just focus on my work, just keep painting and focus on my career. That's what I really, really want.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what a lot of people want. And it's what a lot of my students want.
Yeah.
And certainly what I want. So
yeah, I'm sure. But I'm just like, I feel like it gets in the way of my spiritual practice and everything. I've been really good and disciplined about this, but man, when you have to pull an all-nighter, forget about it. You're not meditating the next day. You're going to fall asleep. Yeah. So I just don't know the best way to approach it. In one hand, I was thinking, maybe I should will to have all my debt paid off, but you don't want to mention debt because you don't want to mention the negative aspect of what you want. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
You don't want to mention that. You just want to, mention the positive, or should it be a general thing for like ongoing prosperity? I'm just really not sure how to approach it. I think it's because there's a lot of hangups around money, especially with my family. And so it's hard to see it clearly.
But that's important, right? Because we also have a lot of cultural hangups about money. And in our culture, we have a lot of weird hangups about money. Like we have this schizophrenic idea, schizophrenic is too low of a word, but we have a self-defeating idea that it's like, oh, if you're an artist, you should just be pure and not sullied by money. Or certainly, I get so much flack just for charging for my courses. It's like, oh, my time's not valuable.
Yeah,
like you've never bought an occult book, but suddenly if I spend tens of thousands of dollars to do this online, I should be doing it for free. It's like, oh, okay, like. But then it's hilarious for magicians because it's like, but then if you don't have any money, as I have not for many years of my life, then they're like, oh, if you're such a powerful magician, why haven't you just manifested yourself money? It's just like, I can't win. Fuck you guys. But long story short, look, this is important, right? And the idea that money is not spiritual is silly. It's like the first two rungs of yoga are get your life in order so you're not stressed all the time. But money is fucking the prime thing of that,
Right.
So we just have all these weird ideas about money. So there's a lot in doing money magic. There's a lot to go through. There's techniques. There's what do you ask for? There's binding the negative side. There's getting out of your own way, which is most of it, looking at your own limiting beliefs. So let me ask this for everyone here on this call. If I did a very in-depth course on money magic, where we actually went through the process of manifesting wealth, how many people would be interested in that? And I caveat this by saying, this will probably be higher paid than the normal subscription thing. But if I did do that, how many people would be interested?
Me.
Because this would be like a month-long course or something. It wouldn't just be like a one-off. It would be like a process similar to the 7-day supercharger, but longer. So raise your hand if that's of interest to you.
It's of interest to me. That's for sure.
Okay. So here are my general thoughts on it. You're kind of answering your own question in that if I'm hearing you right, you are already drawing a line between the result of a one-off getting money or clearing debt and a more sustainable lifestyle.
Right.
So I think you've already answered your question in that respect, if that makes sense.
Meaning that I should be going for a more sustainable lifestyle type of ritual? Is that what you mean?
Well, do you want a chunk of money, or do you want to not have to worry about money?
Yeah, I want to not have to worry about money. Ultimately, I keep having to go for the chunk because it's like I have a bus cycle, and then the bills come in, and then it's like, oh shit, I have to have this in like a week or two. So it just seems like a crazy way to live. That I just just the idea of having the money for next month's bills would be amazing to me. Even that would be great. So I'm just looking to get off the hamster wheel and,
So if you were to make a perceptual shift around this that you think would be more effective long-term, what would it be?
What do you mean? I don't know what you mean exactly.
Well, you're talking about a boom or bust cycle, where you're thinking in
Right.
short-term chunks where there's not enough and then you need more and then there's not enough. What would a more
Oh,
stable way of thinking about that be?
yeah. I would love to have just everything paid for easily. The money is there. More than enough is there. Like extra is there. You know,
Mhm.
having a savings for emergencies would be great. Something
Okay.
I haven't ever had pretty much. So like a little cushion and not have to scramble and stress out every month,
Okay.
basically.
And you'll notice there's not a specific number attached to that.
Right.
Or
Is
if
that
there
bad?
was, it depends. I mean, well, it's what you're describing is a condition, but the monetary, you will notice if you think about it, that the monetary value there is largely flexible because
Right.
that number depends on what your overhead is.
Right. So do you think it's important to figure out my overhead and then do money magic in that way and be specific about I'm bringing this much in every month or every year or something?
That would be a good start, right?
Right.
But because if you can't measure it, then you can't manifest it.
Right.
But
That's
what
true.
I'm calling your attention to is that, oh my God, I'm $2,000 in debt. I need to manifest $2,000 is very different than I would like to not have to. I would like to basically stabilize my existence.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
So then that's
true.
what I call your attention to in terms of, and that's a very different approach to life. I mean, this is why
Yeah.
people take day jobs, right? They make
Right.
that calculation and they say, I'm willing to trade 40 hours of my work week in a job that I don't like in order to stabilize that. Artists don't think that way.
Yeah, I know. everyone I know is in this situation. Every single artist I know is in this situation.
Which means that they have to think more.
Right.
You know, they have to get more clever and resourceful than the average person who is simply happy to take a white collar job.
Right.
Now, that said, in our modern world, this isn't specifically about artists, but the old adage that if you have a job, you're safe is no longer true because most
Right.
people's jobs don't last longer than
Yeah.
a year now at most.
Yep.
So the idea that there's some kind of white collar security net is just simply no longer true. These are all things that I have a lot to say about these things. I'd have to cover, a multi-month course because people approach these. It's very much a question of what are you asking for? And what are you asking for is the most important question in Magick because the techniques of getting something are clear. You know them already. If you've taken my courses, you know
Right.
them. They're very straightforward. But the question of what do you ask for? Now that's critical.
Well, yeah, that's my question. That's kind of how I led with this is how do I phrase it? And I guess I don't know how to phrase it because I don't fully know what it is. Maybe I feel confused about it basically,
Well, we could talk about a very, very taboo topic, which is completely forbidden to speak of in America, and which people's faces melt if you begin to discuss it. It is far beyond the Necronomicon, race, any other taboo topic, right? Extremely forbidden. And I will not open the evil seal on the evil Pandora's box unless, if anyone tells me not to open Pandora's box, I won't. But if you would like me to, I will.
Do it.
Is anyone adverse to opening this Pandora's box? Going once, going twice. So open them. All right. Great. Devin's interested. Okay. The topic is class in America. A taboo topic because there's not supposed to be class in America, right? It's forbidden. Oh no, America, you can be anything you want in America as long as you work hard enough. Is that true? No, it is absolutely not true, right? And the key word there is work hard enough. That's the key. Some of you may remember from high school history or college history class a writer named Alexis de Tocqueville. Does anybody remember Alexis de Tocqueville? Going back to becoming professorial. Alexis de Tocqueville was before I start this, is anybody on this call not from America? I'm guessing not. Most of my students are in the US. Okay, let me know if you're not. So, okay, if we're all in America, then we're all in the same boat, right? So the theory of America, the propaganda line is that if you as long as you make it to America and you become an American citizen, or maybe even if you're not a citizen, you can become anything you want, right? That's what we're told. Okay, now there's some truth to that, but really it's not true. Alexis de Tocqueville was a French observer who came to America in 1820. He was the first foreign observer to come and try and to travel around America and try and figure out what this country was. He, this was 31 years after the outbreak of the Revolutionary War. And I'm sorry, the French Revolution. Okay, so anyways, the country had just started. And so he was the first one to try and get to grips with what the hell this thing was. He traveled all over what was then America, and the conclusion that he came to was this. This is another one of these forbidden things that you're not supposed to know. He said that America, as long as it exists, will be the unhappiest country in the world. Right? Also, we're not told this. It's supposed to be the greatest country on earth. Now, why is America the unhappiest country in the world? Does anyone have any ideas? Nope, nobody. Well, okay. Yes, we are what we are. America is the unhappiest country in the world for this reason. America is the only country still in 2019. It is the only Trump. This is a fleeting phenomenon. It is. Note not the passing shadows on the wall of samsara. So America is in 2019 is the only country where if you're poor, it's your fault. Right? Yep. And that's the story. I mean, this is the Paul Ryans of the world. Well, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You don't need medical care. That'll be a nice goad to you working harder as an actuary. Right. Oh, you're missing a kidney? Well, pull those bootstraps up harder. So, without taking political sides, this is clearly true. And every other country in the world, it's not the case. If you go to England, for instance, if you're born in the working class, you are working class. And the second you go outside, people can immediately spot where you're from and where you are in the fine gradations of the social pecking order based on how you're dressed, the fine gradations of your accent, your interest. Like people, the minute you open your mouth and talk, people will place exactly where you are on the social ladder in England, and that will not change in your lifetime. It's still like that in some places on the East Coast and in the Midwest in America as well. That are still more tied to Europe, certainly at the South. So people are tied to their class, and there is unfortunately, the real destructiveness of that is that people can't escape their class. They have ceilings on them. They can't change class. But the comfort in that is that they don't have the expectation that they should, right? And so, for instance, the working class in England have an extremely close-knit sense of solidarity and group interest, and they're all in it together, and they all look out for each other, more or less, and they have a sense of being a cohesive group. And if people try to get outside of that, then they'll be like, oh, well, who are you all of a sudden? That type of thing. People do that all over the world. But the class is inescapable, but there is comfort in it, in that there is safety in numbers, group cohesion. There are specific social structures, and each class takes care of itself. That is not true in America, because in America, everyone is living under the delusion that one day they too will be Donald Trump, and they're rushing to stab each other in the back to get to the next thing. They don't, without the sense that, oh, we're all working class, they have no need to look after each other because they don't define themselves as a group. And this is the great tragedy of American politics, and why, I don't want to get political, but of course this is what, this is dominated party politics in the U.S. And it's why class interests are never we never ever vote class interests in America, because we don't believe we have classes when we obviously do. Obviously, right? Somebody who grows up in Appalachia is not in the same class as a cultural creative in Los Angeles, who is not in the same class as an investment banker in New York, who is not in the same class as somebody in the Bush family who came over here on the Mayflower, right? It's just not, anyways. Now, that said, you can absolutely change class in America, and you can do that in Europe, and that's profound, and that is well worth protecting, and that is critical. But the idea that there aren't classes is not true. So why is this important? It's important because we need to understand where we are first before we change it. Agreed? Mm-hmm. So here is my definition of class. And when I say definition, I mean it's the attitude that each class has towards money. And what we're really talking about when we're talking about wealth magic is not, the tactics are easy, but what we're talking about is, we're not even talking about money. Money is just a way of keeping score. What we're talking about is our relation to the world around us. Fair enough?
Right.
Artists are a little bit different because they're basically like sadhus. They're kind of like renunciates. So they kind of have their own class, And so I'll discuss that as well. And this is why people always say, artists are the most dangerous people because they associate with all levels of society, right? I'm sure you've heard that.
Right. Yeah.
So artists and magicians and mystics are in a slightly different boat in that they're like sadhus in India. They're dropouts. So here's my take on class. And my take on class has nothing to do with any political or economic analysis. It is purely to do with one's attitude towards money, right? So obviously we could talk about the complexities of structural construction and what class actually means in America and throughout history and all that. But I'm not going to talk about any of the specifics. What I'm going to talk about is the attitude towards money, not why people have that attitude towards money, not the legacy of oppression or the legacy of why people are, born into poverty, why poverty is hard to escape, et cetera, et cetera. These are all topics for social science. We're in a course on magic. So here's my take on it. TM copyright, do not share. This is a hot take.
Got it.
So this would be part of the wealth course.
Cool.
So lower class. What is the attitude of the lower class towards, or the working class? Actually, working class is a misnomer, because what's called the middle class in America is now actually the working class. Robert Reich, who many of you know, who's an economist, did a analysis of the class or the wealth breakdown in America, and it's something like, some of you may have seen this. I'm not going to dig the link out, but it's something. I'll just summarize it quickly. It's something like this: poor. If we're looking at a graph, poor in America is like this: poor, poor, poor. So if we're on an x-axis, so the x-axis would be class or social status, right? Social status. Y would be how much money you have, right? So here's how it breaks down. It's like poor. This is America, 2019. Poor, 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 working poor, or excuse me, homeless, 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 poor, 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 working poor, lower middle class, upper, middle class, upper middle class, like you have a job in management, upper class, rich, wealthy, the 1%. I'm not even like that, yeah, right? It's like what people think is wealth. Like people live in a delusion. They live in like a magic show, like no pun intended. Right. It's like what people are told is wealthy is so inconsequential compared to the Sam Waltons of the world. It's like, there was a meme going around. It's like, what rich is? Rich is when you have a larger yacht to dock your yacht in.
Have you seen that show Succession?
No, I've seen ads for it.
It's so good. You got to see it. But it was these rich guys talking, and one guy was saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter if this business deal that's going to make me $500 million falls through. I still have $5 million coming to me." And the other guy's like, "Oh, $5 million's not even worth the trouble. It's just."
Oh yeah, no, that's not a joke. People
that's like nothing.
5 million for most people. Look, recently people were ragging on Bernie Sanders because he has $1 million. You need $1 million just to retire as a middle class individual in America.
Right.
It's like, it's nothing. And it means nothing to people. Like financial traders lose that in a day and they don't blink. It's like,
right.
So, and people who are millionaires have an inferiority complex because they're not billionaires. And people who are billionaires have an inferiority complex because they only have 1 billion. It's a very Buddhist lesson in there. So, but anyways, so class. So I say this because what people think of as middle class in America is basically the working class, right? Middle class used to mean you had a white collar job and you didn't have to do manual labor, right? Now there's very little manual labor left in the U.S., relatively speaking to what it used to be when we were a manufacturing hub. So working class, basically, if you're working, chances are you're probably working at a desk. So, and America largely it largely sells smoke and mirrors now, meaning apps, intellectual property, services, we're not manufacturing. So when I say working class, let me say the poor. All right. Now, again, an end to the interminable rant. Here's to the meat and potatoes. The attitude of the poor meaning hand to mouth, towards money is this. Money is random, right? It is tied to luck. It is boom or bust. It is tied to specific monetary values, numbers. It fluctuates. If you ask a poor person what rich is, they'll probably say having $1 million. But the view of money is that it is random. Now, how do we know? Who plays the lotto? Open question. Do middle class and do rich people play the lotto?
No.
No, right? If you see, oftentimes very poor people will have you will see, if you hang out with street people a lot, you'll see an obsession with chance and randomness. It's kind of a magical thing in a way. Where what I'm talking about is you see tattoos of cards, tattoos of dice, obsession with gambling, obsession with my luck has just the phrase "my luck has just run out." I'm down on my luck, or I just need to get my luck back. It's interesting because it's very similar to the Asian concept of the universe and of magic, but the view of the poor of money is that it fluctuates like a roulette wheel, and it is largely random. And if they're not rich, it's because they didn't have the luck to be born wealthy. Fair enough, right? So what is that? It means they don't understand how money works. Everyone with me so far?
Yeah.
So there you can see. So the next question is: so if you were to do magic, as many people do, if you were to do magic from that overall cosmology, what would happen?
You'd get it randomly,
or it would work and you would get it, but then what would happen?
Yeah, then you wouldn't have it. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly what I'm saying. Right. It's like this concept is true completely across the board for all magic. Right. It's the same way. If you do magic within a Christian viewpoint, it's going to be totally different from magic within like a Taoist viewpoint. This is what I constantly try to point people's attention to. It's not the spell, quote unquote. It's the overall worldview. That's where the results you're getting are coming from your map of reality. They're not coming from the things you do within it. You're moving game pieces, right? And focusing on the game pieces, you need to look at the game board, right? Because the results you're getting are from the game board, and reality is infinite. You can play any game you want, right? So, okay, so. Moving on, the middle class, right, which is really the working class in America, caveat, but the middle class, here's the view of the middle class, right? The view of the middle class is that hard work gets you money, but it's not just that, right? It's basically, if you play by the rules, you are taken care of. Where people who are poor don't have a sense of playing by the rules, they have a sense of the deck being stacked against them. Language intended. It's like, oh, it's random, and it's like, and if I get money, it's probably like a fluke, or it's a good luck. It's like the system has smiled upon me. That's my luck. But the view of the middle class, as inculcated from birth, and we can then talk about like intergenerational poverty, is that if you play the game correctly, you are taken care of. And what does that mean? That means getting good grades in school, choosing a sensible career, not burning out on drugs, not getting pregnant out of wedlock, having enough skill, and not just skill, but soft skill, social skill to maintain a day job. And when I say soft skill, that largely means knowing how to not rock the boat and make your superiors pleased. And this is what generates the vast docility of the middle class and why they're so... Ass. Well, it's a fucking survival skill, right? And that's why the middle class are endlessly manipulated by the powers that be, right? Tragically. Yeah. So then you kiss ass to get, you work your way up, you get a little bit, you start out at $20K a year, $30K, $40K. By retirement, you're maybe making $60K a year, and hopefully you socked away enough into a retirement that you don't end up in a nursing home where people are not coming to your room for 5 days on end, right? As happens. So, or you even end up in care, right? So that's the American middle class, and that you have kids so that your kids will hopefully be able to take care of you in your old age. This is largely what we have known as the backbone of America, and it's what has driven this country. Now, very tragically, as we have witnessed in our lifetimes, you don't need me to tell you, this has largely gone away, and these people have been betrayed. I come from this background, right? Most people on this call probably do, or many of you do, right? Yep. Some of you may be in danger of needing a new yacht to dock your yacht in which case, please subscribe more and consider donating to magic.me so that we can expand the school. And I'm sure I'll work with you to make it a nice tax write-off. Okay. And hey, maybe a ride on the yacht once a year, or not. I don't need a yacht ride, anyway, tell your friends about it. So obviously that's gone. The idea that you can stay stable at a job no longer exists. Betrayal. People's retirements, their 401ks vanished overnight in 2008. If they'd had enough money, intelligence to not withdraw at the time, they would have been more than fine, but most don't. That's why they're middle class. And so people's life savings were decimated. A lot of the rage almost all of the rage we're currently seeing in the American political climate is because of the betrayal of the middle class. This also extends to education. So obviously we have all been exposed to the evil SJWs have ruined academia, right? Well, what's that argument? It really has an important core, which is that it's not the politics, it's that people are paying $40K a year to send their kid to a school that does not prepare them disadvantages them from joining the middle class. All it does is saddle them with lifelong debt and a education of how to problematize 19th century texts or some horse shit like that, and it's meaningless. So the middle class has been betrayed. And, my line on this is, how dare you fuck with us, the American middle class. And here at our most sacred sanctuary, the Olive Garden. Yeah, you think I'm joking. So it's tragic. It casts a shadow over my life. Certainly if you're a millennial, if you're a millennial, and I promise this is not a rant, because actually what I'm talking about here is not the tangent. It is the core of what we're doing here. Since everyone says they're in America, and I broadly have a very clear sense of who almost all of you are. Even if I haven't met you, I generally have a good idea of who you probably are, just based on I know who my students are. So we're getting down to the core. This is not just I could talk Kabbalah, but this is what really matters, right? The middle class has been the bulwark against fascism. And not just fascism, but any totalitarianism, left or right. It's the bulwark against things falling apart. And if America falls, then, as it very likely will, then we're in for a very, very hairy situation. So you are all here for one reason or another. But I suggest to you that if you are not consciously aware of this, you should be aware of this, is that magic is a survival skill, right? At the end of the day, yes, we can talk about counting the nose hairs of God all we like, right? But at the end of the day, when your back is to the wall, magic is a survival skill, and it has been for all of human history. Right? So what are we doing here? We are readying survival skills, because, even to talk about, you'll notice it at the beginning of Chet and I's conversation, we casually dismiss the idea that we casually assume that money magic is a thing that works. So just think about that for a second. You're largely all in a situation where oh yeah, I could manifest money. Well, think about that for a second, right? I mean, imagine that's a fucking step, right? I mean, think about that for a second. Oh, I could magically manifest money, but I don't know if I'm doing it right. Help me, oh wizard. Dude, you can magically manifest money. What do you need my help for? So right? So all I'm kind of doing now, I can rant at you about the class structure in America, and it will be very helpful, I promise. But let's just not take that for granted. Magic is a survival skill. Okay, so we don't need to dwell on that too long, but so the assumption of the middle class is that the harder you work and the smarter you work, the more money you make, and that largely has to do with not rocking the boat and following the rules. Who makes the rules? Anyone?
Don't we make the rules? We're supposed to make the rules.
I'm not talking about magicians. I'm talking about normal people. Yes, you're correct, but we're normal people, right? Who makes the rules that the middle class follows? If the middle class is defined by if how well they do in their mind, their entire life from cradle to grave is defined by how well they follow the rules from the day they start toilet training to the day they graduate high school to the day they are angling for their year of retirement. Who sets the rules that they struggle to follow, right? And that religions enforce, right? It's like Christianity is a religion of following the rules, right? But let's not get on a tangent, right? It's like, who sets the rules? Right. Let me just say this. Is it the middle class?
No.
No, because if they were setting the rules, they wouldn't make it such a fucked up game, right? They would make it a lot easier on themselves. Okay, yeah. So Howard Zinn, some of you may know Howard Zinn, the history writer. I believe he's dead now.
Yeah, he's awesome.
I got to see him speak before he passed, which was good. He wrote a book called The People's History of the United States. Howard Zinn talks about when he was a kid, they told him he grew up in the Depression. And he said, it's like when I was growing up, they told me the harder you work, the more money you make. Well, I looked at my father, and my father broke his back every day of his life, sleeping 4 hours a night, doing manual labor. His whole body was a callus, sweeping floors, lifting, steel girders, manual labor his whole life. And he had nothing to show for it. So how much harder do you have to work?
Right.
Right. So, and that's always been true. Now you can't even get those jobs, right?
All right.
So I've applied to sweep floors and been turned down for it, right? I mean, that's America post 2008.
Wow.
So, okay. So the middle class is defined by the harder you work within these rules that are set, the better you do. Don't rock the boat. And we understand that has been betrayed. And that breaks my heart, because those are people who they did everything right. They didn't go out of this. Society set them a track. They didn't go outside of the bounds. They worked as accountants. They worked as lawyers. They worked as real estate agents, and they saved up for their kids' braces and to send their kids to college. And they did everything right, and they played everything by the book, and they went to the soccer practices, and they followed the law, and they did everything scrupulously, and they were betrayed. Society failed them, right? Society failed the poor much earlier. But now it's failed the middle class as well, because we just don't care about it. And it breaks my heart. And so what is the upper class? So how does the upper class define its relationship with money, right? It's very simple. The upper class sees money like this. Money is produced by money.
All right.
The upper class, the line that divides the middle class from the upper class is the middle class believes the lie of trading time for money, work for money, labor for money. Therefore, they are kept as slaves, potentially white-collar slaves, but collared nonetheless. The upper class understands that money produces money. So what do I mean by that? The upper class does things like invests in index funds. They understand that the things that, instead of purchasing disposable goods, they do things like buy real estate and invest in the market and start companies and buy companies. Right? They use their money to purchase things that generate money. It's that simple. And so the upper class lives in a world in which money is generated for them by their investments rather than their work. Now, granted, one's starting capital certainly affects that, but this is certainly accessible with willpower to the middle class. It's just a question of just a question of changing one's orientation towards money. Financial freedom. Now, everyone has a different idea of rich, right? Some people's idea of rich is making it through the week. Some people's idea of the rich is, I don't have to worry about money. Some people's idea of rich is $1 million or $1 billion, or, some people's idea of rich is, I need to have a private rocket to Mars and to have, like immortality, I need to shoot up the blood of adolescence like Peter Thiel so I live forever, right? If anyone knows about that, it's a real thing. So
really,
yeah, Peter Thiel, one of the founders of PayPal, the super right-wing guy, gets blood transfusions from teenage boys.
Oh shit! They did that on Silicon Valley, that show.
It's a real thing.
That's saying, oh my god,
it's a real thing. That's when you know you're rich.
Yeah,
it's like Robin Williams used to have the joke. It's like cocaine is God's way of letting you know you have too much money. Now it's injecting teenage boys' blood is God's way of letting you know you should probably go back to your cocaine habit. Jesus.
Insane.
All right. So just to recap, and I'll get out of ranting. Poverty is defined by seeing money as generated randomly or as a consequence of luck. Being middle class is defined by trading time for money in whatever way. Being upper class is defined by using your money in such a way that it makes money for you. It's generated as numbers on a screen without you having to do anything while you sleep. That's what being rich is. Now, final point, and this goes directly to your question. What is financial freedom? Right? A financial freedom means you don't have to worry about money.
Right.
Now, to take this all the way back to the beginning, I said that number is totally flexible based on what your overhead is. So if you need to pay upkeep on your yacht to make sure it doesn't rust while it's sitting in your other yacht, your overhead is going to be very high. But if your overhead is simply affording your rent, food, and art supplies, it's not yacht money. Right. It's different. It's a different will. We all have different wills, right? We all have true wills. We have different orbits in life. So we need to get out of the American idea. I propose the American idea that the richer you are, the better you are is nonsense. We all understand that intellectually, but we don't really understand it emotionally because it's so loaded for all of us, for everyone.
Right.
Particularly for Americans, for the reasons I said at the beginning. It's like we have such a sense of self-worth tied up with money.
Yep.
It's yeah, for everyone, right? So,
Yep.
but I would say that as magicians, I propose, although it's obviously everyone has their own opinion on this, I propose that the goal here is to fulfill your true will, right? So that may be different for everyone. Somebody's true will may be to be an investment banker. Somebody's true will may be to be, I know magicians who, in my life, I have associated with street magicians who cannot afford a needle with which to inject heroin. And I have associated with magicians who, work for the S&P, Standard and Poor's, or are currently inventing new financial exchanges with which to trade crypto on, right? After working as quantitative finance people for decades, right?
Right.
And it's like people aren't that different, It's like they all have a sense of lack and not having enough. It's hilarious, right?
Right.
Here's the kicker. What is financial freedom? Financial freedom is simply, I will define as your investments generating more wealth than you need to live on a monthly basis. So you could live in a cardboard box and be financially free if that's how you want to live.
Right.
That's financial freedom, right? That is attainable as long as the overhead is low for most people.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier than you might think once you map out the numbers. And this is something that I would like for everyone. And this is something that, it's way outside of the scope of this call, unfortunately, but this is something that I will, is probably going to be the goal of this money course coming up, right? It's certainly going to be one of the goals, and using Magick to do that. That's financial intelligence. Financial intelligence is getting to a point where you no longer have to sell your time, particularly as you get older, for money, right? Because time is limited and we're not getting younger.
Yeah.
So now, why is this important? This for me is important as a magical goal because it fulfills the first two rungs of yoga, yama and niyama. It stabilizes your life and therefore allows you a stable platform from which to practice magic, mysticism, art, or whatever your disciplines happen to be. It also allows you to achieve your true will if your mind is clouded by money worry all day long, you are not going to be working on your true will.
Exactly.
In the 90s, they used to talk about this very issue on the alt Magick news group. I don't know does anyone remember, has anyone been around long enough in the Magick scene to remember alt Magick? Anybody? Wow. I feel very crusty now. Jeez. Alt Magick was the news group. And does anyone remember news groups?
Yes.
Okay. Thankfully so. Anyone besides Chet remember news groups? They still exist, by the way. Okay. One person. Okay, cool. All right. I'm not that old. Okay, good. Jeez. Okay, so alt Magick was the primary Magick news group. And who was on it? Kat Ironwood was on it. Joel Barocco was on it. I think Isaac Bonewitz was on it. It's like 20 people or something. But like, it's the same as now. We're just like, people would just like flame each other all day long on it. It was like the archetypal, like the biggest flame fest of all time. It was amazing. And nothing ever changes in the Magick community. And there was lots of hilarious posts. But there was one thing that emerged from the alt Magick where people came up with the concept of crisis magicians, right? Where if you're a crisis magician, it means that you are constantly doing magic to get out of crises financially. Right. Usually you're saying, I was a crisis magician for all of my 20s. I didn't stabilize until my early 30s, and it took a serious effort. It was one crisis to the next. Lost all my possessions twice. I got thrown out of country. Well, one country at least. It's a nonstop crisis and constant magical warfare. So stabilizing is a worthy goal because it fulfills the first two rungs of yoga, from which you have a platform to practice yoga and magic, through which you may fulfill your true will.
That's exactly how I feel. That's my problem. It's like I don't have.
Is it a problem, or is it knowing is half the battle? And I would submit that this is true for everyone on the call, including me, right? I mean, if anyone does not feel that way, please let me know. Yeah. So so step one is we need to completely ditch this idea of like magicians are above money. Yeah. Okay. You know who said that? Aleister Crowley. You know what Aleister Crowley was the heir to a brewing fortune. His father died when he was 7 years old and left him all the money from an entire beer. It's like Heineken, or so it's like, you're the heir to the Heineken family and you get all that money in a trust fund and you blow through it by your early 30s, trying to beat mountain climbing records learned the Kabbalah and doing heroin. And then he said that, I was like, oh, like a magician should be above money and a gentleman of the world. It's like, okay, well, that's nice to say if you're a trust fund kid of the upper middle class in England in 1904, right? But, but then he spent the second half of his life, in the gutter, like stealing from his students, scrounging off his students, because he never developed the skills to get money.
Right.
He never worked a day in his life. That's not healthy. John Balance is another example of that. A lot of people probably remember John Balance from Coil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. John Balance never worked a day in his life. I knew friends of his, right? Just genius, right? John Balance met Sleazy when he was 18 and basically was a kept man for his entire life. His boyfriend was, constantly getting work doing Nine Inch Nails videos and all this, doing music industry work all day long and basically bringing home the bacon while John Balance never left the house and was just sitting around drinking all day long,
wow.
doing ketamine and playing with synthesizers and looking at Austin Spare paintings. He never, that's what he did. And they made great music, but he died in his 40s. He never developed,
wow.
He never worked a day in his life. And it's not healthy.
No.
People so, all right. I'm going to cut myself off here. So, long story short, what I've attempted to do here in my usual rambling grandpa fashion is to outline a series to depict the current economic climate. I've gone from macro to micro, right? I've started with at least the macroeconomic climate in America. We haven't even gone to the whole world. That's a different issue. We've shrunk down to, I've outlined a series of board games one can play, right? That are largely defined by one's attitudes towards money. Those are classes in America, which are not even supposed to exist. And then finally, I've defined the game in winnable terms, regardless of one's class. Now, and finally, the final point is that if you are an artist or a magician, you largely are you are not outside of class economically, but you are slippery, right? It's like you're not defined by any of them for better or worse. And I mean, there are Damien Hirsts in the world, right? It's like,
yeah,
there's
it's the 1% of the artists, though.
Right. I mean, it's like, and very well, it's like the art world is a commodity trading industry like anything else, in New York and all of that. But so there's classes even within the art world, but artists and magicians are able to magicians. Here's my definition of a magician is somebody who is able to redefine games at will, at least for themselves. And you said it yourself. It's like, who makes the rules? Well, we do. Yes, we do. But that's because we're special. So so if you're a magician, when it comes down to it, you have the ability to redraw the rules. And so finally, I have defined the rules in a way that is winnable, which is financial freedom is that your investments. And by the way, here are the 4 quadrants of investments. This comes from Robert Kiyosaki, who stole it from another guy. I'm not stealing it because I'm citing it, but the 4 quadrants of investments are stocks and bonds, primarily index funds, and we'll talk about that in the money course. Real estate, stocks. Yeah, okay. Stocks and bonds, meaning market investments. Real estate, businesses that you own, not that you work in. And finally, intellectual property. So for instance, if you're an artist and you create a comic book character that you own the rights to, right? Or a logo or something that you're getting royalties on. Stephen Cho?
Mm-mm.
I think that's his name. Stephen Cho, I believe that's his name, is a famous LA graffiti artist.
Oh, David Cho.
Oh, David Cho. Yeah. Thank you.
The guy who painted Facebook and
yeah.
Yeah.
David Cho, get this, everyone. Now here's something to magic up, right?
Yeah, right.
Right? Like this is an example of how think about this in terms of magic breaking the rules of reality, because this is I don't know if magic was involved in this. I assume it wasn't, but this is an example.
Seem like the type.
Okay, probably not. He seems extremely materialistic, to say the least.
Totally.
But think about this in terms of breaking these are the types of magical sorceric breaking the rules of reality that one might angle for in today's day and age, rather than casting fireballs. Consider everyone wants to throw fireballs. Okay, we'll consider doing this instead. David Cho, I think, he knew Mark Zuckerberg from Harvard or something like that, or they knew each other somehow.
I'm not sure how the connection was made.
when Facebook, I don't know either, but when Facebook opened their first office, Zuckerberg or somebody else, Sean Parker, maybe he knew Sean Parker, somebody like that, invited him to come like do a mural on the walls, like just to do like the office mural, the new Facebook office. It's like, it's like our cool startup, you know? And so he did. It's like, and he was like, well, this is my fee. And he's like, oh, sorry, dude, we can't pay you, but because we don't have any money because we're just a startup, but will you take 1% of Facebook stock? He was like, God damn it, you guys. What the fuck? So he walked away with 1% of Facebook stock and never thought about it again. David Cho never has to work another day in his life.
No.
He spends every day of his life getting prostitutes at massage parlors.
And gambling.
Really?
Yeah. You know, before he got that money, he said, at least on the Howard Stern show one time, he said that before he made the Facebook money, he had won $1 million in Vegas because he's like a gambler.
So this here we go. Like, what is the attitude of the poor towards money?
Right. Exactly.
Now, it doesn't say that you lose everything. You could win, right? But that's a rarity, right? But you know, we always hear, there was a news story a week ago, and I'm gonna have to cut this off because other people are waiting.
Yeah,
Jesus
I know.
Christ.
I
had two Monster Energy drinks today. This is me in the evening. You normally see me in the morning. This is after I've gotten going. So there was a news story a week ago or 2 weeks ago. There was a family, somebody won the lotto and got something like $30 million. And it was all gone in a year. And then him and his girlfriend were arrested doing home invasions, robbing people for more money.
Wow.
Right.
Crazy.
So it just goes, and we know this just from looking at the lives of people who win the lotto. It's like you can get $1 million, but if your mentality doesn't change, you're right back to
right.
Nothing changes.
Right.
Anyways. So more will be revealed in the course, but that's my broad point. It's like, what game are you playing? Have you defined the game as winnable? I hope that's helpful and not just off the fucking deep end.
Yeah,
by the way, I am not a registered investment advisor. So talk to a registered financial advisor, for God's sake.
Well, just really quick though. I mean, okay, I understand changing your mindset, but what's the verbiage you use to get financial stability? Okay, your mindset's changed. I want to use, is it like about using magic to change your mindset?
Well, how would you, if you were going to put it into a statement of intent, what would it be?
Not just that I'm financially stable, basically, or that's the magic, you know, because I don't know anything about this shit.
About what?
Money stuff, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I should learn, but you know, I have my own business and all that, and I've learned a lot, but you know.
Well, by the way, can you do magic for something that you don't? And actually, you know, is this one of the primary uses of magic? Can you do magic for something you don't know how it's going to happen?
Yeah, can't you?
Of course, right? That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. You let the how happen on its own. Exactly.
And that's kind of where magic is. It's like you say it's like where there's a will, there's a way. Like, okay, thank you. But it's true. It's like, you know, you can do, this is how magic works. You do ritual work to manifest a result, and then the result comes to you usually at an unexpected time and through an unexpected way. And so the real art of magic is both asking for the right thing and then having the presence of mind to acknowledge it when it shows up and not missing your chance. Right. So when the bus shows up, get on.
Right.
I'm very guilty of doing many times in my life, summoning the bus and then not getting on. But that's kind of the whole point. It's like, you don't need to know how it's going to happen. And it's like, but you know, of course, the money course will explain everything in detail. So there's your result right there. But also, some people may or may not remember, I also already have a whole course in cryptocurrency, which is bitcoininsider.io. If you want to dive into the crypto universe, if you want a little preview of financial sorcery, that's a good place to go. And yeah, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Good book.
Yep.
Good book.
Donald
Underrated.
Trump swears by it.
Well, it was working for him, right? I mean, there's a good...
Born into it.
Well, yes, but I mean, you know, here's the hilarious thing about Donald Trump. Final point. Does anyone on this call know, and does anyone know what index funds are on this call?
Not really.
Okay, here's your first tip, right? So when you think of the stock market, people usually think, oh, I need to pick the right stock, and it's all a gamble. Again, thinking in terms of chance. An index fund is a fund that owns a small amount of every stock on the entire market. So you invest only in the entire market and it balances out, and generally it only goes up with smaller fluctuations. And there are very low expense ratios on them, particularly if you go to a place called Vanguard, which was set up to beat the mutual fund industry and give people index funds at very low rates. Again, speak to your investment advisor. But Donald Trump was given $1 million by his father. Donald Trump has made and lost billions in his life. If Donald Trump, and he offers this as proof of his business acumen, if Donald Trump had taken the same money and simply put it into an index fund and went golfing for the rest of his life, he would be richer than he is now.
Classic.
This is the power of financial intelligence. Anyways, hopefully this is somewhat helpful. All right.
Yes.
All right. Hope you really, really enjoyed that. It's a great conversation with Chet Zar. You can Google him to find out more about him and his art. Chet Zar, Z-A-R, and check out magick.me, magick.me. And for all of our courses, lots more coming, and tell your friends. All right, everyone, hang in there. Talk to you soon. Lots of love.